The night was still, unnaturally still. Fog pressed against the tall iron gates of Ravenwood High, swallowing the moonlight whole. The town below lay asleep, unaware that the old building standing on the hill still breathed in the dark. Inside, the school's hallways stretched like veins through a corpse. The walls were lined with faded portraits of smiling students, faces long forgotten, eyes that seemed to follow anyone who passed. The only sound came from the rhythmic squeak of a mop sliding across the tiles. Mr. Callan, the night janitor, was finishing his shift. A tall, thin man in his late 50s, with weary eyes and hands calloused from decades of quiet labour. He'd worked at Ravenwood for 27 years, long enough to know every creak in the floor, every hum of the lights, but that night something felt off. The air was colder than usual, and the silence too deep. His small radio, the one he kept clipped to his belt, hissed with faint static. He tapped it, but the sound didn't clear. "Great," he muttered. "Not again." He mopped near the trophy case, glancing at the dusty awards inside. The oldest plaque was from 1987, the year the school reopened after a mysterious fire. The engraved names were half faded, except one that was still readable. Mr. Graves, head of discipline. Callan sighed, pushing his mop toward the next hall. He always hated this part of the building, the old wing with its broken ceiling fans and the strange cold spot near room 12. The school board had sealed it years ago, but somehow the door always ended up unlocked. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam swept over the lockers, catching a small handprint on the glass, smeared red. He leaned closer. "Paint?" he whispered. Something landed on his sleeve, a dark, warm droplet. He raised the flashlight toward the ceiling and froze. A long, wet trail snaked across the tiles above, leading toward the far end of the hall. Slowly, a faint tap, tap, tap echoed in the distance, like someone walking barefoot. He swallowed hard. "Hello? Who's there?" No answer. He followed the sound past the science lab. The lights flickered as he passed, on, off, on again. Each time they came back, the hallway looked slightly different. Chairs in new places, doors slightly ajar. The air smelled faintly of smoke. The tapping stopped near the end of the hall, where an old locker stood half open. Callan shined the light inside. A small notebook lay inside, a student's journal, its pages darkened with age. On the cover was scrawled in uneven handwriting, "We never left." A chill crawled down his spine. He reached out, then jumped as the locker slammed shut on its own. His flashlight flickered and died. The radio on his belt crackled back to life, filled with static. Through the distortion, a voice whispered, open quote, "Don't turn off the lights." Close quote. Colin staggered back, fumbling for the hallway switch. The bulbs flickered once, then burst one by one, sending shards of glass raining down. Darkness swallowed the corridor. He could hear breathing now, not his own, heavier, slower, right behind him. He spun around, flashlight trembling in his hand. For a split second, he saw something in the beam, a tall shape, standing motionless in the center of the hallway. It wore a porcelain mask, cracked and yellowed with age. Its eyes were hollow, its head tilted slightly like it was studying him. The light died again. He ran. The sound of footsteps followed, not rushed, but steady, deliberate. Step, step, step. He reached the main door, keys shaking in his hands. Come on, he hissed, trying to fit the key into the lock. But the key wouldn't fit. The metal twisted in his fingers like it was melting. Then he heard it, faint laughter. Children's laughter. It echoed from every classroom at once. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking. "Who's in here?" The laughter grew louder, overlapping voices, giggling, whispering. He dropped the keys and backed against the wall. A light flickered to life at the end of the hall. Room 12. The door creaked open. Inside, faint orange light shimmered, the glow of a fire. "No," Callan whispered. "No, not again." He took one hesitant step forward. The floor beneath him felt warm. The smell of smoke thickened, and distant screams echoed through the hall, like voices trapped behind the walls. Inside room 12, he could see silhouettes sitting at desks. Students motionless. Their outlines flickered in the firelight, and at the front of the room stood the same tall figure with the porcelain mask, pointing a long ruler toward him. Open quote. Late, the voice rasped. Detention. Close quote. The fire roared to life. Callan screamed, a sound that ripped through the entire building, but outside the fog was too thick for anyone to hear. By morning the school was empty. The mop lay in the hallway beside a puddle of red water. The radio still played faint static, and somewhere in the distance, if you listened closely, a man's voice whispered, open quote, "Don't turn off the lights." Close quote, riding tension. The sun rose pale and weak the next morning, shining over Ravenwood High as if afraid to touch it. News spread fast. The janitor, Mr. Callan, had vanished. His mop and radio were found near the old wing, in a puddle that looked suspiciously like dried blood. The police came, looked around, and left before noon. Their report said no signs of struggle, but every student knew something wasn't right. For years there had been whispers about the fire in room 12, the students who died, and the teacher who vanished. But now it felt real again. By lunchtime, 4 seniors had gathered at the back of the schoolyard. Emma, Jake, Ryan, and Sophie. Emma sat on the stone bench, tying her hair back. She was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of person who didn't believe in ghosts, only facts. Jake, her best friend since childhood, was the opposite, confident, sarcastic, and always up for trouble. Ryan, tall and restless, loved the thrill of anything forbidden. And Sophie, well, Sophie loved stories, especially the kind that scared people. "So," Sophie said, grinning, "midnight dare tonight?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You mean break into the school after what just happened?" Jake smirked. "What's the worst that can happen? We see a broom move." Emma frowned. "You guys are insane. Someone actually disappeared. Maybe we shouldn't mess with it." But Sophie leaned closer. "Don't you want to know what happened? The police didn't even go into the old wing. What if there's proof of something, a diary, a name, something left behind?" Ryan nodded. "An hour inside. That's all. Whoever lasts the longest wins. The rest owe them a week of lunches." Jake grinned. "Deal." Emma hesitated. "You're all idiots." Then after a moment she sighed. "Fine, I'm in." That night, 11:45 p.m., fog rolled over the empty streets as the 4 teens met behind the gym. The moon hung like a sickle in the clouds. The school loomed before them, dark, lifeless, but somehow watching. Jake pushed the old window open with a crowbar. "Ladies first," he said. Sophie laughed nervously. "Yeah, right." They climbed in one by one. Inside, the air was freezing, heavy with the smell of dust and metal. The hallway stretched out ahead, silent and endless. Their flashlights cut through the darkness in shaky beams. Every sound echoed. Their footsteps, the soft creak of floorboards, the hum of electricity that wasn't supposed to be there. "Creepy," Sophie whispered, "like the place is holding its breath." "Let's split up," Ryan said. "We'll cover more ground." Emma turned on him. "No, that's how people die in horror movies." Jake chuckled. "It's just an old school, Em. Relax." They divided anyway, Ryan and Sophie toward the second floor, Jake and Emma toward the basement. In the basement was colder than above. Their flashlights caught glimpses of old desks, broken trophies, and forgotten equipment. The floor was wet, and every drip echoed like a heartbeat. Emma's beam landed on a wall of lockers, their paint peeling away. "Look at this," she whispered. On one locker, written in red, were the words, "We never left." Jake frowned. "That wasn't here before." "Maybe it's Callan's blood," Emma said softly, half joking, half afraid. Jake crouched to touch it, then pulled his finger back. "Not blood. Paint." Emma leaned closer. "Smell it." He did, and froze. It smelled metallic. They turned toward the sound of something falling behind them. A chair had tipped over on its own. Slowly, another followed. Then another. As if invisible hands were dragging them into a circle. Jake whispered, "Let's get out of here." But before they could move, a faint sound filled the air. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Something was writing on the wall. They turned their lights toward the far end of the basement. Letters were appearing on the concrete, carved by something unseen. Slowly the words took shape. "Detention never ends." Upstairs, second floor. Meanwhile, Ryan and Sophie wandered through the dark corridors. Old posters fluttered on the walls. Science Fair 1986, Safety Week, Detention Rules. Sophie's light fell on a cracked photograph, a group of students smiling beside a man in a black suit. "Who's that?" she asked. Ryan squinted. "Says Mr. Graves, head of discipline." She touched the photo and jumped as the glass cracked under her finger. The man's face split down the middle. Then, from somewhere down the hall, came a faint whisper. "Stay in your seats," Ryan laughed uneasily. "Probably the wind." Wind doesn't whisper sentences. The intercom above their heads hissed to life. Static filled the air, followed by the same soft voice, childlike, hollow, open quote, classes in session, close quote. Sophie's flashlight flickered, then died. The hall went black. She reached for Ryan's hand. Where are you? I'm right. His voice cut off. Sophie? Something cold brushed her shoulder. Then a hand, small and ice-cold, grabbed her wrist. She screamed and ran blindly through the corridor, slamming into doors. Her light flicked back on and froze her in place. In front of her stood rows of students, shadowy, transparent, their faces burned and blurred. They sat in perfect rows at invisible desks, heads bowed. At the front of the hall stood a figure wearing a cracked porcelain mask. Mr. Graves. The mask's hollow eyes turned toward her. The figure raised a ruler, slow, deliberate. Open quote, no talking during class. Close quote, the intercom screamed with static. Sophie dropped her light and ran. She didn't notice Ryan's flashlight lying on the floor, still turned on, or the faint shadow of someone being dragged into a doorway behind her. Back in the basement, Jake and Emma climbed the stairs, pale and trembling. Something's wrong, Emma said. We need to find them and leave. They reached the second floor. The lights above them flickered. Sophie's flashlight lay near the lockers, the beam still on. Jake called out, Ryan! Sophie! No answer, only the faint sound of someone crying. Emma followed the sound to a classroom door. It was slightly open, just enough to see inside. She pushed it gently and froze. Inside, all the desks were occupied by those same shadowy students Sophie had seen. They sat still, silent, their heads tilted down. And at the front of the room, Mr. Graves stood facing the blackboard, writing with a piece of chalk that squealed with every stroke. Jake whispered, What the hell is that? The figure stopped writing. Slowly, it turned its masked face toward them. The chalk dropped from its hand. Open quote, You're late, the voice rasped. Close quote, the door slammed shut. Jake pulled the handle, it wouldn't move. He kicked it, shouting Sophie's name. Inside, muffled banging echoed, then silence. The door creaked open again by itself. The room was empty. Every desk was clean, every chair perfectly straight. Only a single ruler lay on the floor, snapped in half. Emma picked it up. Her hands were shaking. Jake, we need to go, now. They ran down the hall, but the building had changed. The windows were gone, replaced by brick walls. The exit sign above the door flickered, letters rearranging themselves until it read, Class in session. A soft voice whispered from behind them, echoing down the hall. Open quote, Don't leave before the bell rings. Close quote, Emma screamed. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, the shadows breathing like living things. Emma and Jake ran through the endless corridors, calling for Ryan and Sophie, but their voices only echoed back, hollow, twisted, as if someone else was repeating them. Open quote, Sophie, 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 close quote. Emma stopped, panting. Her flashlight flickered across the walls. Lockers stood open, their doors swinging slowly. Inside, books and papers were scattered, and each locker had a name tag. But the names were wrong, they weren't random. Jake, Emma, Sophie, Ryan. The exact same names, written in old faded marker. Jake stepped closer, eyes wide. What the? This can't be real. Someone's messing with us, Emma whispered, but her voice cracked. Deep down, she didn't believe her own words. The air grew heavier. The floor beneath them creaked, and somewhere far away a bell began to ring. Ding, ding, ding. The sound echoed through the empty halls, long and distorted, the school bell but slower, deeper, as if it was coming from underwater. Jake looked around. What time is it? Emma's phone screen glowed faintly. Midnight exactly. The bell stopped. Silence. Then a new sound, faint static from the intercom, followed by a whispering voice. Open quote. Students, please return to your classrooms. Close quote. Jake's light flicked across the ceiling. The speakers were old, dusty, disconnected, yet the voice was coming from all of them. Open quote. Detention begins now. Close quote. The hallway lights burst to life. All at once, blindingly bright. When their vision cleared, everything looked different. The walls were freshly painted, the floors clean and polished. Posters looked new again. Welcome back, students, and the faint smell of burning chalk filled the air. The school wasn't abandoned anymore. It was alive. Jake grabbed Emma's hand. We're leaving, now. They sprinted down the stairs toward the gym, but the doors were gone, replaced by brick walls. Every turn led them somewhere new. A classroom where none had been before, a staircase that ended in solid stone, a corridor looping back to itself. Emma's flashlight beam caught something moving in the distance, a figure walking slowly down the hall. It looked like Ryan. "Ryan!" she shouted, relief flooding her voice. He turned and froze mid-step. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He was shaking violently. "Emma!" he gasped. "Sophie's gone." She... He couldn't finish. His voice broke. "What do you mean, gone?" Jake demanded. Ryan's flashlight trembled in his hand. "She ran ahead. I heard her scream. When I found her light, she was just gone. No footprints, no sound, just this." He opened his hand. Inside was Sophie's phone. Cracked. The screen blackened. Jake took a step back. "Okay, enough. We're breaking a window." He swung his flashlight against the nearest window, but the glass didn't break. It bent, rippling like water. Then the reflection changed. Instead of their own faces, they saw a classroom filled with students, the same shadowy figures as before, sitting at desks. At the front, the porcelain-masked man stood facing them. His reflection lifted the ruler and pointed directly at Jake. Open quote. No talking. Close quote. The window shattered. Jake fell backward, bleeding from his hand. He blinked. The shards of glass around him were gone. The hallway was empty again. Emma knelt beside him. "Jake, are you okay?" He nodded weakly. "We have to find an exit. There's got to be another way out." Ryan pointed down a side corridor. "Principal's office. There's an emergency exit there." They followed him, every step echoing too loudly, like the sound was amplified. Posters on the wall began to change as they passed. The words shifted, rearranging themselves. "You're late. Sit down. Class isn't over." The air grew thicker, like breathing through smoke. Finally, they reached the principal's office. The door creaked open by itself. Inside, the room looked frozen in time. A dusty desk, an old rotary phone, and filing cabinets stacked to the ceiling. Emma rushed to the cabinet marked Records and began rifling through files. She froze when she found one labeled Ravenwood Fire, 1987. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Open quote. "Fire broke out in room 12 during detention. Cause unknown. Teacher and 5 students presumed dead. Building reopened after reconstruction in 1990. Incident sealed." Close quote. Jake frowned. 5 students? Ryan counted. "Sophie, Jake, Emma, Ryan, that's 4. They all looked at each other. "Who's the 5th? Emma whispered. Before anyone could answer, the phone on the desk rang. "Ring, ring, ring!" Jake jumped. "Don't pick that up!" But the ringing grew louder, more frantic. The papers on the desk fluttered. The lights flickered. Emma slowly reached for the receiver. "Hello?" For a second, nothing. Then, a voice, soft and young. Open quote. "You shouldn't have come back." Close quote. Emma dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor, but the voice continued, echoing from the air itself. Open quote. "Class is in session." Close quote. Ryan grabbed the doorknob. It burned his hand. The metal glowed red-hot, sealing shut. Smoke began to seep from the corners of the room. The temperature rose. The walls darkened, as if burning from the inside out. Jake smashed a chair against the window, but outside wasn't the parking lot anymore. It was a burning classroom. He could see students inside, screaming silently as fire consumed them. And in the front, Mr. Graves stood perfectly still, his porcelain mask glowing in the flames. Open quote. "No one leaves," he whispered, though his lips didn't move. Close quote. Ryan turned, coughing. "We need another exit." Then something yanked him backward. He was pulled toward the filing cabinets by invisible hands. He clawed at the floor, screaming, but the drawers flew open one by one, swallowing him whole. Papers scattered, and then silence. "Ryan!" Emma screamed. She ran forward, but the cabinet slammed shut. Jake pulled her back. "He's gone. We can't." The fire vanished. The room was normal again. No smoke, no heat, just silence. The cabinet stood perfectly still. On one drawer, a new label had appeared. Ryan, Detention. Emma backed away, tears in her eyes. It took him. Jake's voice trembled. "We have to survive till morning." The intercom clicked on again. Open quote. "Good morning, class." The voice of Mr. Graves echoed, calm and deep. "Today's lesson is obedience." Close quote. The lights flickered red. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside, slow, heavy, deliberate. Jake picked up a broken chair leg, holding it like a weapon. "If that thing comes in here." The door handle turned. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The door opened halfway, revealing darkness beyond. Then, from the shadows, something rolled into the room. Sophie's headband, soaked in blood. Emma screamed. The door slammed shut. And from behind it, the voice whispered again, this time right next to the wood, soft and clear. Open quote, no running in the halls. The clock in the hallway struck 1 a.m., a hollow, metallic sound that seemed to echo from inside the walls. Emma stood frozen in the principal's office, her breath shaking, her flashlight trembling in her hand. Beside her, Jake stared at the file cabinet where Ryan had been taken. The label still glowed faintly red, Ryan, detention. The silence was unbearable. Every instinct screamed at Emma to run, but the door refused to open. She felt trapped inside a nightmare that wouldn't end. "Jake," she whispered, "we have to find another way out." Jake nodded, his face pale and soaked in sweat. "There's one place we haven't checked, the old wing." Emma's stomach dropped. "Room 12? He nodded slowly. "If this all started there, maybe it ends there." The intercom crackled again, the same calm, hollow voice of Mr. Graves. Open quote, "Late again, Miss Carter. Report to room 12 immediately." Close quote. Emma froze. "How does he know my name?" The lights flickered violently, and the hallway beyond the office filled with the faint sound of a school bell. It rang 3 times, ding, 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 and the walls seemed to pulse with every tone. Jake gripped her hand. "Don't listen to him. It's not real." But it was real. The air itself felt aware, watching, breathing, waiting. The Hall of Memories. They stepped into the hall. The school had changed again. The walls were pristine white now, lockers freshly painted, trophies shining in their glass case. Voices echoed faintly, laughter, chatter, footsteps, as if hundreds of invisible students were passing by. Emma turned a corner and gasped. Old photographs now lined the walls, stretching from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of faces, black and white. Each face had something scratched out, the eyes, the mouth, sometimes the whole head. But one face was untouched. Mr. Graves. His porcelain mask looked less like a mask now, more like skin stretched too tightly over bone. The photo seemed to breathe. Jake reached out to tear it down, but as soon as his fingers touched the glass, the photo moved. Mr. Graves smiled. Open quote, "Sit down." His voice whispered through the frame. Close quote. The glass cracked. Jake pulled Emma and ran, boots slamming against the tile. The laughter of unseen children followed them, echoing louder and louder, until it felt like the whole school was laughing at once. The room that shouldn't exist. They turned a final corner and stopped dead. At the end of the corridor stood a door scorched black, the number barely visible, 12. The air around it shimmered with heat. The faint smell of smoke and burning paper filled the air. Jake swallowed hard. "You ready?" Emma shook her head. "No, but we don't have a choice." He pushed the door open. Inside was a classroom, untouched by time. Desks arranged neatly in rows, chalkboard covered in equations. But every desk had a uniform folded neatly on top, with a name tag pinned to it. Emma's eyes scanned the names, Jake, Ryan, Sophie, and then her own. The chalk began to move on its own. Slow, deliberate strokes forming new words across the board. Open quote, "Welcome back, class." Close quote. The door slammed shut behind them. Jake spun around, pounding on it. "Let us out!" The chalk stopped moving. The room went silent. Then, one by one, the uniforms in the seats began to rise. Invisible figures filled them, heads forming from smoke, arms stretching out of the fabric. Emma backed away, trembling. "No, no." At the front of the classroom, Mr. Graves appeared. The porcelain mask gleamed under the flickering lights. His ruler dragged across each desk as he walked. Open quote, "You were all late," he said, voice calm but echoing through the air like thunder. "And in my class, lateness means punishment." Close quote, Jake picked up a chair. "Stay away from her." Graves tilted his head, the mask creaking. Open quote, "Detention." Close quote. Jake flew backward as if struck by an invisible force. He slammed into the blackboard, gasping. The chalk leapt from the tray and began carving words beside his head. Jake, detention. Blood seeped from his nose. He tried to move, but couldn't. Emma screamed, grabbing his arm. "Jake, get up!" The figure of Mr. Graves turned to her. "Miss Carter, you seem to have forgotten your lesson." She stumbled back, clutching her flashlight like a weapon. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" Graves stepped closer. Open quote, "Obedience, respect, and remembrance." Close quote. He pointed to the chalkboard. Open quote, "In 1987 I taught 5 disobedient students. They mocked me, burned my classroom, killed us all, and now." Close quote. He reached out, the porcelain mask splitting slightly as he smiled. Open quote, "You've come to finish what you started." Close quote. Emma shook her head violently. We didn't do anything. Graves's voice deepened, echoing through the walls. Open quote, their souls never left. You wear their names, their faces, their sin. Close quote. The ghostly students began to chant softly, voices overlapping, whispering her name again and again. Open quote, Emma, 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 close quote. Jake managed to pull free from the wall, grabbing her hand. We're leaving. They ran toward the back of the classroom, where a faint orange light glowed through a broken wall. It looked like the exit, maybe a window. But when Emma climbed through, she found herself back in the same hallway. Room 12 was behind her again. Jake followed, panting. We're trapped. It's looping. The intercom crackled. Open quote, you can't leave class before the bell. Close quote. Then the bell rang. Loud, metallic, endless. The sound made the walls shake. The windows shattered outward, revealing not the outside world but an inferno, fire consuming the entire corridor. Mr. Graves appeared again at the far end, walking slowly through the flames. The mask began to melt, revealing a blackened, skeletal face beneath. His voice now sounded like 100 overlapping tones. Open quote, sit down, Emma. Close quote. She shook her head, crying, No, I'm not one of them. Open quote, everyone belongs to Ravenwood eventually. Close quote. He raised the ruler. The air warped around it like heat waves. Jake shoved Emma aside as the energy struck him full force. His scream echoed through the hallway as his body turned to ash, leaving only his name tag fluttering to the floor. Emma fell to her knees, sobbing. The fire around her roared higher, closing in. Then, through the smoke, she saw the janitor's radio lying near the door, the same one from that first night. It was still playing faint static. She crawled toward it, grabbed it, and shouted into it, Please! Somebody help me! For a second, the static cleared, and a familiar voice whispered back. Open quote, Don't turn off the lights. Close quote. Mr. Graves stopped. His burning form froze mid-step. Emma looked up and saw the ceiling lights flickering violently. She remembered that night's first warning. She reached up, pulled a broken wire from the ceiling, and slammed it into the nearest desk. Sparks exploded, igniting the floor. The fire spread fast, swallowing the ghostly students, consuming the walls. Mr. Graves screamed, a sound like glass shattering. His mask cracked, pieces falling to the floor as the flames consumed him. Open quote, class dismissed, close quote. The blast threw Emma backward. The morning after. When she opened her eyes, it was dawn. She lay on the school's front steps, covered in soot, the fog curling gently around her. The building behind her was silent, dark, untouched. No fire, no sound, no ghosts. She stumbled to her feet, turning toward the doors. They were chained shut, rusted, as if no one had entered in decades. The police arrived minutes later, lights flashing. They found her standing alone, staring at the windows. She didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. Open quote. They never left. Close quote. Epilogue. 2 weeks later, Ravenwood High was officially condemned. The town sealed it off for good. But one night, a maintenance worker checking the grounds reported strange lights flickering inside. He claimed he heard the faint sound of a school bell and children laughing. When authorities investigated the next morning, they found something new written on the front door, carved deep into the wood. Class resumes Monday. And inside, on the teacher's desk of room 12, a new name tag lay waiting. Emma Carter, Detention.